Now, while PSG and Chelsea, they have gone head-to-head several times before, 8 times prior to Sunday, it has been years since they have played each other. The last time was back in 2016 in the Champions League.
Marquinhos has to go down as a PSG legend, huh?
Without a doubt.
Has to.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he is kind of sort of the first legend, probably. I mean, a ton of those players have played. Mbappe will probably be considered one in due course. But, yeah, Marquinhos having gone all the way through this era, and you see with that team on the field that day that it could have been a team that gone on to win something, but clearly they needed to establish something first. And I think Luis Enrique is the first to have actually done it.
You look at this lineup, and I remember being at the PSG store on Champs-Élysées. I was still in high school, I think. And PSG, the takeover had just happened. And their first, real icon was Javier Pastore.
Yeah.
Out of all people, there was a huge plaster picture of Javier Pastore in that store. And to think that they went from Javier Pastore, with no disrespect to Javier Pastore because he's a very good footballer, but then to having a team with the likes of Mbappe, Messi, Neymar as kind of the poster boys of this new money era PSG. And then now they've kind of gone full circle and they've gone for the likes of Pastore-like players that aren't like superstars like the 3 I just mentioned, but they've comprised this team that is really good. We're talking about Fabian Ruiz.
Yeah.
You know, I think Fabian Ruiz walks down the middle of the street, maybe not in Paris, but in many places in the world. And I don't know if people recognize him immediately like that.
Same with Desiree Doué before he arrives at PSG. You make the stars rather than buy them. I think that's been their model the last 2 years.
Is that still something, though, that's a bit jarring to you with all the teams and the highlights that we saw from PSG, with all the superstars that they've had, that none of them went on to win Champions League? And it was the team this year with players who you were saying they could walk around the streets in other places other than Paris, and people wouldn't recognize them.
With Paris.
With Paris. With Paris.
It's the type of players that they've bought, though. The philosophy that they've adopted. Before it was not aging, but stars who were a little bit maybe over the hill. Big salaries. They want to come play in Paris. They want to live in the big city. Not necessarily the motivation of a Wittyngham, of a João Neves, of a Nuno Mendes. Young players who are not quite stars, but won't have that hunger to run, to fight. They didn't have that in their team before. They had highly paid, established stars who were like, you guys run. I'm not doing that. I'm Zlatan.
I think they wanted to be a cool club before they were a good club. And I think they... And to be fair, when you're kind of building something from scratch, it's an understandable approach. When you're trying to be the club from Paris, you're trying to be this sort of fashion brand. They wear Jordan kits instead of Nike kits, and you're trying to represent something. And you need to have players like Zlatan and Di Maria and Messi and Mbappe and Neymar to come through the door in order for that to mean something. But I think now that they've kind of established themselves as that, I think 2 years ago, and it's funny because let's also be honest, they have a lot of money back in their project, and so they can go and completely change their identity. They can make big mistakes, and they have made big mistakes. Kolomuani and Gonzalo Ramos are not strikers that are impacting them. They spent probably more than 150 million on the two of them. It doesn't matter because they just keep throwing money at it, but in a way that actually makes sense, that is towards something rather than trying to be cool and fun and interesting.
That's the key. It's not if you're spending money or not, it's how you spend that money, right? It's Doué, Barcola aren't PSG born and bred, right? Barcola was at Lyon, Doué was at Rennes, and they threw out, I think Barcola went for 50
years close to that,
million euros or something like that. Relatively unproven. It's okay, this kid has talent, but let's bring him on and we'll make him a superstar, right? Just envisioning what life is going to be like post Mbappe. And then he kind of doesn't end up being that young star that stood up above the rest, and ended up being Desiree Doué, who was actually pretty quiet between August and December, and come January he transformed into that kid that scored a brace.
And I remember when they signed Doué, it's like, wait, he's going to be the 6th attacker in this team. He's going to play it all? And, behind Ramos, Kolomuani, eventually Cavara, Dembele, we thought of as a winger. And there are all these players, Barcola as well. All these players we thought, is Doué going to make an impact on this team? And yet you can definitely give credit to Luis Enrique for it doesn't matter what that profile is or what your star power is. If you contribute to the team, if you can prove it on the training pitch and prove it in your opportunities that you deserve a bigger role in the team, he will give it to you. And it's about what you do more than who you are. And I think that's another reason why they have so much success.
And what they were able to do was go on to win 4 trophies this year. They could win their 4th one of the season if they win Club World Cup final this Sunday. So if they do, where would you put them in the rank of all-time best seasons.
Yeah, it would be their 5th, right? And then they would have the Super Cup and the and the Intercontinental Cup, which would be 7. Literally, they're 3 games away from winning 7. Oh no, more. The Intercontinental Cup is going to be a couple more games. I think they go into the semifinal.
I think so. Yeah.
So 4 games away from winning 7 titles. You have to argue it's up there with one of the best seasons of all time, especially after what? Imagine how I told you. All right, Mbappe's gone, and I'm going to tell you, Chris, in May of 2024. PSG is going to have the greatest season in their club history. Arguably, one of the greatest seasons in football history. You would say, Nico, you are stupid, mon ami.
But I do remember watching PSG last season, and the bones of this were there. Even with Mbappe scoring all the goals that he did, you're like, oh, I remember I commentated their quarterfinal and semifinal of the Champions League last season, and I remember watching them going, oh, I spent a lot of money here. Like, this is a different thing. And they did it in a completely different way than they did in the past. So you could see that the bones were there, but I still don't think, even earlier in this season, if we're still calling it this season, September, October, November, they weren't showing this level. But now that they are, it's kind of difficult to see if and when they won't.
The Barcelona treble team ended up winning all trophies available to them. That was 6, obviously.
And of course, there was no Club World Cup in this format at the time. Yeah,
they couldn't win 7. How did the Bayern team that won the treble, did they also go on to win? They won that Club World Cup. That was in Morocco, I believe. Luis Enrique didn't win it all. I think they lost the Spanish Super Cup to Athletic Club. Like, that's what you got to consider. Right. You got to consider PSG up there. Like, I wonder how the game against Spurs is going to be. That's going to be Thomas Frank's official debut.
I think I'm going to enjoy that.
Arsenal fan over here. Well, I will say, it is kind of funny that we were talking about this Club World Cup as having been won, when they haven't won it yet. They have to go beat Chelsea.
No, if they win.
If they win, sure. But I think we're kind of talking about it as this foregone conclusion, when it might not necessarily be. I do think that Chelsea are not on the level of Paris Saint-Germain, but on any given day, as they say. Right, exactly.
Give me a balance. What is this, 60-40 in PSG's favor?
I would say 85-15.
I would go 65-35. I was about to not do that. 65-35 for me.
I was told there would be no math. But no, I think PSG are massive favorite. I think they're minus 200 to win in the 90, and Chelsea are plus 500. So that gives them about a 20% chance of going on to win this game, which that seems about right to me. I think that PSG are a level above, but Chelsea have brilliant talent. We saw João Pedro score 2 goals. Yeah. Cole Palmer can have a brilliant performance. There's a number of things that can happen.
Chelsea are onto something, clearly.
Yes.
They're
building well.
And João Pedro, plus 4. What was producer Chris? What was the odds? Plus 430 for Chelsea.
Okay.
That's impressive.
You throw $1.5 billion at the wall, something's going to stick, brother.
I forgot what I was going to say now. I was so focused on the odds. Yeah. PSG are a force. Oh, this is what I was going to say. It's kind of like a predator that pounces on their prey. They have the prey, and then they just play with the food. You know, kind of like those sharks that play with the seals. Big
cats, like tigers, or the messing around with their food.
They just toss out the seal, and they love it, and they toss it out. You can't make those type of mistakes. And clearly, if someone's a predator and someone's the prey, PSG are the predator and Chelsea are the prey. You cannot make the mistakes that Real Madrid made yesterday, because then the predator will play with their food.
I didn't know where you were going with that. I'm glad it ended the way it did.
Yeah. Honestly, if you're Real Madrid, and again, I feel so bad for Xavi, because you spent the 2-3 days building for this game, training for this game, and that happens in the first 10 minutes to completely out of your control. Your players are making those type of mistakes. Chelsea cannot make those type of mistakes. You need to pull off the perfect game against PSG, like Botafogo did, guys. Reigning Copa Libertadores champion.
Comes back to Botafogo.
Beat the Champions League champion.
Do you have a sponsorship with them? Are they paying you to say it? We're saying every block.
No.
I've never seen an Argentine ride this hard for a Brazilian team in my life.
We are all united as Latinos at this Club World Cup, Aaron.
Come on.